After 60 million years in hibernation, the android legions of the Necrons are slowly rising across the galaxy, relentless in their advance to restore the ancient empire. In this video, we're going to show how to paint your Necrons in the colour scheme of the Zarrakan dynasty, which is featured in the Indomitus box set. We'll be using a mix of both classic and contrast methods, and we're painting them up as battle-ready models as well. Now, the first model we're going to concentrate on is the iconic Necron Warrior. However, by following this guide, you can easily paint up your Scarabs and Crypto Thralls as well. So when you're ready, grab those brushes, shake those paints, let's get started. So before we begin painting, the first thing we need to do is undercoat the model. And as you can see here, I've used Runelord Brass, which is perfect for this Necron colour scheme. So the first colour I'm going to apply is Iron Hand Steel. This is going to be to the silver joints. This will also be on the shoulder pads and the face as well. So what I'm going to do is just going to load up my brush. So I'm going to be using a medium layer brush here. I'm just going to apply a little bit to my palette like so. Little touch of water, not too much. Don't want it too thick and goopy. Once I've loaded that up, I've got a nice point to it. We're ready to begin painting. So as always make sure you get a nice point to your brush before you do any of this painting, just to give you more accuracy. Then all I'm going to start doing now is start painting that face, those shoulder pads, and all the little joints between the armour panels. There we are with those silver details now picked out. This will vary from model to model. Some have more battle damage on, so just check the box art if you're not sure. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to painting the black details of this. We'll be using Corvus Black. So previously, like we've done with other base paints, we're just going to apply a little bit to the palette, a little touch of water, so it's just not too thick and goopy. That's probably a little bit too thin there, so add a little bit more. There we go. Get a nice point to the brush, so just spin it around a few times until you're happy, and then ready to start picking out those black details. So what we've got is we've got the gun casing to do here, and we've also got the little cartouche there to do as well. So I'm just going to start doing that. You might want to do a couple of coats because some of that metallic will still show through. So just do a couple of thin coats. There we are, those black details now picked out. We're going to move on to our next colour, which is Caliban Green. This is going to be for the cable that's just dangling down. So it's like an energy cable. So I'm going to use the same brush, just apply a little bit to the palette again, a little touch of water, not too much for this particular part. So once I've loaded that up, we're then ready to begin painting. So all I'm going to do is just start picking that out. Again, you might have to do a couple of coats. Just take your time. And don't go to this part here because that's just some exposed wire in there. And there we are with the green cable now done. We're going to move on to our final base coat, which is to prepare ourselves for the glowy effects. Now this is going to be picking out details in Korax White. So this is on the gun and on his eyes. So I'm going to be using my medium layer brush again, just apply a little bit to the palette, little touch of water, and then we're ready to start doing it. So all I'm going to do, as always, which is key, is make sure I get my brush to a nice point. So just rolling that around on the palette like so really does help do that. And then what I'm going to start doing is just start picking out. So you've got some orbs on his gun here. So I'm just going to start picking those out like so. Also, what you can do is if you thin down your Korax White a little bit more, you can run into those recesses like so. If you do make any mistakes, just tidy back up with Corvus Black when you've done that. There we are with all the base coats now applied. We're going to move on to applying our shades and our contrasts. Now we're going to start by using Kryptek Armor Shade Gloss. This is going to go over all the armour and some of those silver details on the model as well, like the helmet and the shoulder pad. After that, we'll be using Basilicanum Grey. This will go over the black details, but also some of the working parts on his gun as well. To finish off, we'll use Tesseract Glow, which is the nice glowy paint. This is going to go over those Korax White areas. So first of all, let's start off with that Kryptek Armor Shade Gloss. So all I'm going to do is apply a little bit to the palette, like so. You see I'm using a medium shade brush here as well. So just going to load that up, and then we're ready to start coating that all over the armour. So like I said, we're going to do it on the head as well. This will give it a bit of a tainted, tarnished feel. We'll move down to the actual armour itself as well. So just take your time and be careful to avoid it pooling in those recesses as well. Once the Kryptek Armor shade is dry, it's worth just picking out the eyes again with Korax White because you might have stained those with a little bit of brown. So what I'm going to do now is move on to using Basilicanum Grey. This is going to go over the silver details on the gun as well as the black. And don't forget the cartouche on his chest as well. There we are with the Basilicanum Grey now dry. We're going to finish off by getting that nice glow effect by using Tesseract Glow. So we're just going to apply this over all those Korax White details. There we are with our Necron Warrior now done. We're going to move on to our next model, which is the Scorpek Lord. Now some of the methods are going to be the same as we've done for the Necron Warrior. It's a slightly bigger model, so it's worth just going through these details anyway. Now if you're going to be painting your Scorpek Destroyers, just use this guide for that reason as well. So the first colour I'm going to be applying is Iron Hand Steel, and this is going to be to similar areas to Necron Warrior, so the face, the shoulder pads, the silver joints, and also some of the weapons on the model as well. If you're not sure, just check the box out for details. But first of all, let's start mixing that paint. So all I'm going to do is apply a little bit of Iron Hand Steel, mix a little bit of water into it, make sure I get a nice point to my brush like so, and then we're ready to begin painting. So as before, I'm just going to start with the face, but like I say, you've got a few details to pick. We've also got this tabard and these claws here to do. There we are, the silver area is now coated. We're going to move on to applying the rest of the base coats. We're going to start by using Corvus Black for any black details. Any cables that are dark green, we'll be using Caliban Green for that. Then any of the light glowing effects, we'll be using Corax White as a base coat. So first of all, let's start with Corvus Black. So as before, just apply a little bit to the palette, a little touch of water. And again, the key thing, just make sure you get your brush to a nice point. So a couple of spins like so, and then we're ready. So I'm going to start on the actual gun itself. So you've got a lot of casing on the gun here. So I'm just going to start base coating that. You might want to do a couple of coats because some of that Rune Lord brass might start showing through. With the black details now picked out, we're going to move on to painting the green cables, and for this we'll be using Caliban Green. There's just a few of these to pick out, so just be mindful. If you do make any mistakes on the silver, just tidy back up with Iron Hand Steel. There we are, the green cable's now done. We're going to move on to picking out the white areas ready for the glowy effects. I'm going to start on the blade first, and again, you probably want to do a couple of thin coats of this. There's lots of like glowing orbs on this model, so if you're not sure where they are, just check the box art for details. There we are, with all the white details now picked out, we're going to move on to the next step, which is to apply some shades and some contrasts. We're going to start first by using Kryptek Armor Shade Gloss. This is going to be over all the armor panels and also some of those silver details like the face and the shoulder pads. After that, we'll be using Basilicanum and Grey. Again, this will be for some more of the metallic details, mainly the joints in the armor and some details on the gun. Then after that, we'll use Agrat's Earthshade, and this is going to be concentrated on his Flensing Claw. So first of all, let's start with that Kryptek Armor Shade. So I'm just going to apply a little bit to the palette like so. Not too much. I'll just add a little touch of water just to thin it down ever so slightly. And then once I've loaded my brush up, I'm then just going to start liberally applying this all over that bronze armour. Like I said, we'll also be doing the face and the shoulder pads too. With the Kryptek Armor Shade Gloss now applied, we're going to move on to applying Basilicanum Grey. Now this is going to be mainly for like all the bits in the joints like so. I'm also going to apply some on the Flensing Claw, because after that we'll do some Agrat's Earthshade on that as well, just to add a bit of depth. First of all, let's get this Basilicanum Grey in all those joints. There we are, with the Basilicanum Grey now dry, we're just going to move on to using Agrat's Earthshade, and we're just going to keep this to the Flensing Claw. This will just give it an old aged look. And just be mindful of any pooling just down on the tips of the actual claws themselves. Now that our Agrat's Earthshade is dry, we're going to move on to our next colour, which is Tesseract Glow. And this is going to be for all the glowy effects on the model. So I'm going to start on the blade and then just work on those eyes and all the other orbs around. Now for the actual weapon, I'm going to be using a medium shade brush, but when we get around to some of the smaller details, we'll use a medium layer brush instead. So first of all, let's do the big weapon. So all I'm going to do is just apply a little bit to my palette like so. This is just so I don't overload the brush too much. Load it up, and then we're ready to start applying it. There we are. Now we're ready. We're going to start applying that all over the blade, and just be mindful that it doesn't just start pooling at the very bottom of the blade. So just use your brush to soak up any of that excess. And there we are, with the Tesseract Glow now applied and dry. We're going to move on to continue making our glowy effect on that blade. So what we're going to be doing is using Orc Flesh as the first contrast. We'll thin that down with a little bit of medium, and we'll finish off by using Dark Angel Green. So first of all, let's start with the Orc Flesh. So I'm just going to apply a little bit to the palette, a bit more than that. And then I'm just going to wash it and add a little bit of medium, not too much, just like so. And that's about right, actually. So I'm just going to load my brush up, get a nice point to it, and then we're ready to start applying that to the blade. So the effect we're trying to aim to get here is moving it from dark down to light, down to dark, and then do the opposite on the other side of the blade. So what we're going to do is just start applying this like so. Now it might seem quite light at first, but it will actually darken down a bit, and you can always do a second coat if you really needed to. Remember, this is just the first part. We have another green to add after. So I'm just going to join in the middle a little bit, and I'm just going to wipe my finger, which will give it a nice gradual blend. You can use a piece of tissue or sponge if you want to. On the opposite side, I'm going to do the same, but I'm going to concentrate this in the middle, like so. You've got an obvious bevel just down the edge here, so you can use that as a guide. I'm just going to wipe my finger down there, wipe my finger like that. With the Orc Flesh now dry, I did add a second coat just at the very bottom here and just at the top there as well. So what I'm going to do now is move on to Dark Angel Green. So this is a little bit darker, and we're just going to concentrate on the very tips and the darker areas of this actual glow effect. So I'm just going to keep it to the very top like so. Try and keep a little bit of a neat line going on there as well. And then just round here as well. Keep it to the panels, so try not to get into those recesses if you can. There we are with the energy blade now done. Our Scorpec Lord is completed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to painting the Overlord. Now for painting the Royal Warden, use this paint guide as well. So we're going to start off by using Iron Hand Steel. This is going to be on like the light silver details and also the joints in the armour. After that, I'll be using Retributor Armour for any gold details. After that, we'll use Caliban Green for any energy, Corvus Black for any black details, and then we'll move on to Korax White for his stripe on his helmet and also the energy glows. So first of all, let's start with the Iron Hand Steel. So all I'm going to do is just apply a little bit of a dollop there onto the palette, a little bit of water, and then we're ready to start painting. So if you're not sure where the silver details are on this model, obviously check your box art for details, but you've obviously got lots of little joints and stuff which you can pick out. Now in previous ones, we've been painting the whole helmet, but this guy actually keeps his helmet nice and gold, but you have got his shoulder pads, which will need to be painted silver. With all the silver details picked out of Iron Hand Steel, we're now going to move on to Retributor Armour to start picking out this little tabard area, which is going to be gold. You've also got the little crown crest here and some of the text inlaid into his collar there as well. Take your time, and if you can see some of that Rune Lord brush showing through, just do a second coat. With those gold details now picked out, we're going to move on to picking out the energy tubes. So for this, we'll be using Caliban Green. So you've only got a couple on this model, so we're just going to start base coating those like so. Again, probably a couple of coats if you can see any of that Rune Lord brass showing through. With the tubes now painted Caliban Green, we're going to move on to picking out the black details. And for this, we're using Corvus Black. So you've got his weapon to do, and also there's the spine to do at the back as well. With the black details now base coated with Corvus Black, we're going to move on to Korax White now for any white details. So this is going to be getting preparation for the glowy effects, but also we have to do the little white stripe on his helmet as well, which will be the same for the Royal Warden too. Just take your time, and you might want to do a couple of coats of this. There we are with the Korax White now base coated on those areas. We're ready to move on to our shades and contrast. So we're going to start off by using Kryptek Armor Shade Gloss. This is going over the armor panels and some of those silver details as well. After that, we'll use Basilicanum Grey for any of the joints, so some of the silver areas that are in the joints, as well as the black details too. Following that, we'll use Agrat Surf Shade on the gold, and then for our glowy effects, we'll start by using Tesseract Glow, then we'll use Orc Flesh after that, and then finish off with a little bit of Dark Angel's Green. But first of all, let's start off with our Kryptek Armor. So all I'm going to do is just apply a little bit to the palette. I'm going to add a little touch of water to this, just a paintbrush worth. Just mix it in like that, and then get nicely loaded up, and then we're ready to start applying that. So we're keeping this to the areas that got Rune Lord brass on, like so. Obviously be mindful not to get it on the gold as well. Work our way around. And of course you've got these silver areas on the back here we'll need to coat. With those armor areas now shaded, we're going to move on to using Basilicanum Grey for the joints. So what we're going to do is just start applying that into all these little metal joints here. And also don't forget to do it on the black and also these cabling at the back as well. There we are with the armor joints now covered in Basilicanum Grey. We're now going to move over to using Agrat Surf Shade, and this is going to be for the gold details. So again, just take your time and avoid any pooling at the very bottom. With the Agrat Surf Shade now dry on the gold, we're going to move on to the glowy effect. So we're going to start on the blade first. So what I'm going to do is just start coating that as such. Now again, because obviously this is stood up, gravity is going to start pooling down. So just be mindful that you don't get any bits pooling at the very bottom here. And again, don't forget the other glowy orbs on his head and also on his shoulders and his weapons as well. There we are with the Tesseract Glow now dry. We're going to move on to applying Orc Flesh. Now with the Scorpec Lord, he had more of a square or oblong shaped blade, so this one's got a bit more of a curve to it. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to start from dark, go to light, and then go to dark. So I'm just going to start applying Orc Flesh just here. Be mindful not to get it on the bevel. If I do, I can always wipe my finger around the blade like so. So like I say, we're going to be starting dark at the top and then just progressively getting a little bit lighter. So sometimes you might just need to pull a little bit more and then just move down like so. And then I'm just going to wipe my finger a little bit. So you need to do that, make it dark down here, and then on this flat panel here, you want it dark in the middle. With the Orc Flesh now applied and dry, I just did a second coat just near the tips of the blade. We're just going to finish off now with a bit of Dark Angel's Green. And again, I'm just going to keep this to the tips here, just to give that a little bit more sharpness and definition. Same at the bottom as well. Again, you can apply multiple coats to this if you want to, just add a little bit more transition. And don't forget the center here as well. I'm just going to add a little bit here as well. There we are with the Overlord now done. We're going to move on to our next model, which is the Kryptek Reanimator. This follows similar techniques and paints as the previous videos. We are going to take you through it because it's slightly larger. We'll use different brushes and it'd be rude not to as well. So the first colour we're going to be using is Iron Hand Steel. That's going to be for all the light metal areas and the joints. After that, we'll be using Corvus Black for all the black details. We'll be using Caliban Green for any green pipes, and then we'll finish off with Korax White for any of the white glowy areas. So first of all, let's start off with those light metal areas. Now for this, I'll be using a large base brush because it's definitely good for all those like large panels on its actual carapace. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of Iron Hand Steel, slight touch of water, load my brush up, and then we're ready to start painting. So the brush loaded up now, we're just going to start painting those panels like so. So you might want to do a couple of coats because some of that Rune Lord brass will show through. When you get to the joints, you just might want to move to a smaller brush for a bit more accuracy. With those areas now coated in Iron Hand Steel, we're going to move on to Corvus Black for the black details. Again, you might want to do a couple of coats of this, just so you don't see any of that Rune Lord brass showing through. And for this, I'm using a medium base brush. With those black details now painted, we're going to move on to Caliban Green, and this is for some of the tubes. So we've got some tubes down here painted black already, but there's a few just on the top that we're going to be painting green. If you're not sure which ones to paint green and black, just check your box off for details. With the green cables now picked out, we're now going to move on to base coating any of the glowing details using Korax White. So you just got a few orbs to pick out, and again, just check your box off if you're not sure where those are. There we are with the orbs now base coated with Korax White. We're going to move on to applying some shades and some contrast paints. We're going to start with Kryptek Armor Shade Gloss. This is going to be for all the exoskeleton and some of those silver panels on the shoulders as well. After that, we'll use Basilicanum Grey for any of the joints and also over the black details. After that, we'll use Tesseract Glow for the glowing orbs and then finish off with some Agrexer Shade, just to add a little bit more rust and weathering to some of those exoskeleton parts. But first of all, let's start with that Kryptek Armor Shade Gloss. So what I'm going to do is just apply a little bit to the palette, probably 2 paintbrushes worth, and just a little bit of water, just so it's not too neat and strong. I'm just going to load my brush up, and we're ready to start applying that. So I'm just going to start on the legs first of all. So I'm just going to start coating that on like so. Now in some places you might want to move to a smaller brush, but for the most of it, this will be perfect for you. Just be mindful that it doesn't pull in those recesses too much. If you do see that happening, just use your brush to soak up any excess. With the Kryptek Armor Shade Gloss now applied, we're going to move on to Basilicanum Grey. This is for the armor joints, so these little silver details we've got here. Also, we're going to be coating that over the black and these tendrils just at the front there as well. Take your time, and again, just watch out for pooling. Now that we've painted all the joints and the black details with Basilicanum Grey, we're going to move on to Tesseract Glow. So we're just going to be applying this to those white orbs scattered across the model. Just take your time and just avoid any pooling. With the glowing orbs now dry, we're going to finish off by applying Agrexer Shade to the claws like so. This is just add a bit more weathering to make it feel a bit darker and dirtier. And also you can add some of this to like the little script on the top just to give that bit more of a rusty, aged feel as well. Take your time and just avoid any pooling. There we are with that shade now applied and dry. Our Kryptek Reanimator is now battle ready. So what we're going to do now is move on to our final model, which is the Plasmancer. Now there's only one area to focus on this model, and that is his robe. The rest of the model I've used the Overlord paint guide to get him up to completion. So like I said, we're only painting one area. I'm going to be coating this with Drutchy Violet over Iron Hand Steel. So first of all, what I'm going to do is just get a little bit on my palette like so. I'm just going to apply a little bit there. I'm using a medium layer brush for this, so it's a bit more control to it, a nice point as well. So once I've loaded that brush up, we're ready to start applying it to his robe. So all we're going to do is just start coating over the Iron Hand Steel like so. So again, we're just using Drutchy Violet for this, and be mindful, because it's a shade, for it not to pull too much at the bottom. So just be careful and keep an eye on that. If it does start pulling, just use your brush to soak up any excess. And there we are with the robe now dry, our Plasmancer is finished. And with that, our battle ready video for the Zarokhan dynasty is completed. Now there are a couple of things to remember when painting this model. Firstly, when using base paints, try and be as neat as you can. Remember, the neater you are, the better the end result. When using shades and contrast, try not to overload your brush as it can quickly run out of control. If you do find this happening, just use your brush to soak up any excess. And last of all, you will need to base your models. Now check out our separate Indomitus basing guide for this, which will be featured on our Warhammer TV YouTube channel. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed painting your own Necrons, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.